An elderly woman at Costco leaned in close and whispered, "The person behind you has been following you." I laughed at first, until I turned around. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where the store feels like a moving river of carts and chatter. I'd just finished comparing prices on detergent when she appeared beside me, tiny, gray-haired, eyes sharp as glass. Her hand lightly gripped my arm, warm but trembling. Her voice carried no humor, no confusion, just quiet certainty. My smile faded before I even turned. Behind me stood a man in a dark cap, staring straight at the row of cereal boxes. But something in the way he shifted, the stiffness in his shoulders, told me he wasn't shopping. I pretended to grab another item, heart thudding as I caught a glimpse of him in the freezer glass. He moved when I moved. I brushed it off, told myself I was being dramatic. Still, I skipped the rest of my list and headed for checkout. Every beep of the scanner felt too loud. The line crawled forward, and when I dared to glance back, the man was 3 carts behind, pretending to scroll on his phone. I tried not to make eye contact. The elderly woman was gone. By the time I paid and reached the exit, I couldn't find her, or him. The parking lot buzzed with people, sunlight flashing on windshield. My hands shook as I loaded groceries, scanning every reflection. Nothing. No dark cap. No stare. Just an empty space where he should have been. The drive home felt longer than usual. My chest stayed tight, even after I turned into my driveway. I told myself to forget it, that some stranger just happened to be near me. But that night, the feeling returned when my phone rang twice with no one on the other end. Then again, after midnight, same silence. When I looked out the window, headlights idled at the end of the street before slowly fading away. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. That's what I told myself as I locked every door, as if a deadbolt could calm whatever unease had begun curling its way under my skin. But the woman's whisper kept looping through my head, low, deliberate warning. The person behind you has been following you. And somewhere deep down, I knew it hadn't ended in that aisle. It had just begun. The night air was still, heavy with that uneasy quiet that makes every sound feel too sharp. Lena stood at her kitchen sink, rinsing a glass when a low hum drifted through the window. She looked out into the street, expecting nothing, but there it was. A black truck idling across from her driveway, engine purring like it was waiting for a signal. The driver's silhouette sat motionless behind the wheel. No phone light, no cigarette glow, just stillness. Her throat tightened. She reached for her phone and dialed Grant. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice smooth, tired. "What's wrong, Len?" "There's a truck parked outside." "It's just sitting there," she said, watching the faint exhaust cloud twist in the cold air. He sighed. "It's late. Probably someone turning around. You're overthinking again. Go to bed." "I'm serious, Grant. It's been there for 10 minutes. Another pause, then his tone shifted, impatient, practiced. "You know, I can't drop everything just because a car stopped near the house. It's probably a neighbor's kid. Don't let your imagination run wild." Before she could respond, the truck's headlights blinked twice, slow, deliberate, before the engine revved and it rolled down the street, disappearing into the dark. Lena stood frozen, phone pressed to her ear, listening to the empty line after Grant muttered a half-hearted goodnight and hung up. She waited another hour before finally locking up. The silence returned, but it felt different now, alert, listening back. Morning came pale and quiet. When she stepped outside to leave for work, her shoes sank into soft patches of soil near the side gate. That's when she saw them, footprints, clear as ink in the dirt, leading from the driveway to the kitchen window. Her stomach dropped. Whoever it was had come close enough to touch the glass. She followed the prints until they vanished near the fence, the dew still glistening inside each imprint. The unease she'd felt last night solidified into something heavier. She snapped a photo on instinct, then deleted it, feeling foolish even as her hands trembled. When Grant came home that evening, Lena tried to explain. "Someone was here last night. There were footprints. Right by the window." He dropped his briefcase onto the couch, not even looking up. "Footprints?" "Lena, it rained last night. Probably yours. They were too big. And fresh. You don't even want to check." He turned, irritation flickering in his eyes. "Because there's nothing to check. You do this every time I work late. Convince yourself the world's after you. Maybe get some rest instead of creating stories." The words stung more than she expected. She wanted to yell, to make him understand, but the distance in his voice stopped her cold. He brushed past her, heading for the shower, leaving a faint smell of cologne and something metallic behind. Lena stood alone in the kitchen again, the same spot where she'd seen the truck hours before. Through the window, the street looked harmless, quiet homes, porch lights glowing. But in the reflection of the glass, she saw herself, pale and uncertain, and behind her, only darkness, thick and waiting. The first time Lena noticed the change, it was subtle, Grant's laugh sounded rehearsed. The second time, he came home after midnight and smelled faintly of perfume she didn't wear. She asked where he'd been, and he mumbled something about a last-minute meeting, eyes glued to his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen longer than necessary before he flipped it face down on the table. Over the next week, the distance stretched wider. His replies turned shorter, his affection mechanical. When he kissed her goodbye in the morning, it felt like a habit rather than a choice. Lena started keeping quiet, watching instead of asking. That's when she noticed the small things, the new brand of gum in his car, the dry cleaning slip from a boutique she'd never heard of, and a faint trace of jasmine that clung to his collar. Mara came over one evening, wine in hand, settling on the couch with that familiar concern behind her smile. "You've got that look again," she teased softly. "What look?" "The one that means you're pretending everything's fine when it's not." Lena forced a laugh, but it broke halfway through. "He's different lately. It's not just work. There's something else." Mara tilted her head. "Then don't brush it off. If your gut's screaming, it's for a reason. Start paying attention." Those words sank deep. That night, Lena began collecting fragments. Receipts from restaurants she'd never visited, a hotel charge tucked inside his wallet. She wrote nothing down, kept it all in memory, afraid to leave traces. Days later, while walking to her car after a long shift, she caught sight of a vehicle parked a few spaces down. A black truck, the same kind. Her stomach tightened. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it couldn't be the same one, but the feeling refused to fade. The engine roared to life as soon as she opened her door. She froze, keys clenched in her hand. The truck pulled out slowly, turning onto the street, headlights washing over her for a single blinding moment before it vanished into the traffic. That night, she mentioned it to Grant casually, watching his reaction. "Funny thing, saw a truck like the one from the other night." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Coincidence," he muttered. "Coincidence." The word tasted bitter. Lena sat in bed later, staring at the ceiling while Grant slept beside her, snoring lightly. The rhythm of his breathing should have been comforting. Instead, it felt foreign, like a stranger had taken his place. She turned onto her side, eyes burning, mind replaying every detail she'd gathered. Something connected them all. She could feel it, a thread running between the lies, the scents, the sightings. She didn't know what it meant yet, but one thing was certain. She wasn't imagining it anymore. Lena waited until Sunday evening to bring it up. The sky outside was dim, washed in amber light that made everything look softer than it felt. Grant was seated at the table, scrolling through his phone, tapping the screen with that same rhythm that had begun to grate on her nerve. She kept her tone calm. "I saw that truck again," she said quietly, setting down her glass. "The same one. The one that's been near the house. Near my work." Grant looked up, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before it turned into amusement. "You mean Caleb's truck? He's been carpooling with me this month." "I told you that already." "No," Lena said evenly. "You didn't. You said it belonged to a neighbor. Now it's Caleb's." He chuckled too quickly. "You're mixing things up, babe. I can introduce you if it'll make you feel better." His casual tone hit her wrong. Every word felt polished, practiced. "Fine," she said. "Let's do that." 2 nights later, they arrived at a steakhouse filled with low chatter and clinking glasses. Grant's co-workers greeted him with laughter that seemed rehearsed, voices just a shade too bright. He kept his arm around her waist, guiding her like a prop. When she met Caleb, a short, broad man with oil-stained hands, she wasted no time. "So," she said, smiling politely, "you're the one with the black truck?" Caleb blinked, confused. "What truck?" Grant's laugh came too late, too loud. "She means your old one, the one that broke down, right, honey?" His voice cracked slightly at the end. Caleb frowned. "I sold that last year." The table fell silent for half a beat before someone changed the subject, but Lena barely heard them. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she forced a smile and pushed her food around her plate. Grant's hand rested on her shoulder, his thumb tracing small circles. Comforting to anyone else, but to her, it felt like control. Back home, he was overly affectionate. Too many "I love yous." Too many questions about whether she'd enjoyed herself. She nodded, pretending to be tired, then slipped into bed, turning away from him. The bedroom went dark. His breathing slowed beside her, steady and deliberate. She waited. Minutes passed before she heard the soft rustle of sheets, the creak of the floorboard. She kept her eyes closed, heart hammering, as his shadow moved toward the hallway. The faint glow from his phone screen lit the doorway. His voice was barely a whisper, but the words cut through the silence. "She's starting to suspect." The floor beneath her seemed to tilt. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until his footsteps faded down the hall. In that stillness, the truth solidified. Not only had he lied, but whatever he was hiding was closer, darker, and far more deliberate than she'd imagined. Lena hadn't planned on going back there. She told herself she was only running errands, that it was just another Saturday. Yet the fluorescent aisles felt heavier this time, like they remembered her. She pushed her cart past the bakery, half listening to the hum of voices and clatter of carts, when a faint touch on her sleeve made her turn. The woman from before stood beside her, the same neat gray hair, the same sharp, steady eyes. Time seemed to fold for a second. "I thought you moved away," Lena managed, voice catching. The woman gave a small smile, almost sad. "You didn't listen last time." Lena froze. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's not following you anymore. He's controlling you." Lena's pulse stuttered. "Who?" she breathed, though she already knew. The woman didn't blink. "The one you think would never hurt you. He's the reason you keep looking over your shoulder." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper, folding it into Lena's palm. "Sometimes the danger doesn't come from behind. It sleeps beside you." Before Lena could ask more, the woman turned down the aisle, vanishing into the crowd like she'd never been there at all. Lena unfolded the paper with trembling hand. A name and phone number were scrawled across it in neat, deliberate handwriting. Caleb Moore. Her throat went dry. That name. The co-worker. The truck. By the time she reached her car, her thoughts were racing faster than her heartbeat. Grant's smile at the dinner, the forced laugh, the late nights. It all clicked together, forming a pattern too precise to ignore. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at the paper, then opened her phone. She hesitated before dialing the number. No answer. Just a voicemail greeting that sounded cautious, careful. She hung up, pocketed her phone, and started the engine. At home, Grant wasn't back yet. She moved through the house quietly, her steps deliberate. In the study, she found his laptop open, the screen still glowing. Her reflection flickered in the dark monitor before she touched the trackpad. Spreadsheets. Bank transfers. Transactions she didn't recognize. Large withdrawals to an account under her own name. Her chest tightened as she clicked deeper, following each movement like a trail of breadcrumbs. Then the dates began lining up, each withdrawal matching a night he claimed to work late. Lena scrolled until her vision blurred, until the truth stood bare in front of her. Someone was moving money from their joint account into a secondary one, using her identity. The sound of a car engine outside made her jump, tires crunching on gravel. Grant. She shut the laptop, forcing calm into her breathing. As she turned off the light, her fingers brushed the paper in her pocket. The woman's warning echoed in her head, low and certain. He's not following you anymore. He's controlling you. Lena smiled faintly into the dark, a smile that wasn't fear this time. It was resolve. Lena waited until Grant left for work before touching the laptop again. The morning light spilled weakly through the blinds, striping the desk in pale gold. She entered his password, something she'd memorized long ago, but never dared use until now. The files opened like a floodgate. Folders labeled with meaningless initials, buried documents with mismatched dates. One, tucked deep inside, stopped her cold. Voss case notes. Her fingers hovered over the mouse before she clicked. A series of reports filled the screen, timestamps, locations, grainy photos of her car, her workplace, even her walking the aisles of Costco. The captions were clinical, detached. Subject met with unidentified elderly female. Subject purchased items at 1403. Subject appeared unaware of tale. Her stomach turned. Someone had been documenting her movements for months. Every errand, every detour. But it wasn't random surveillance, it was ordered. She scrolled to the bottom of the report and saw the signature. Client G. Voss. Her breath caught. Grant had hired someone to follow her. She leaned back, pulse pounding in her ear. The black truck. The man in the cap. The warnings. All of it traced back to him. She opened the attached invoices, each listing payments from their shared account, disguised as consulting fees. Then another document appeared, an email thread. From Grant Voss. To R. Maddox. Subject. Confirmed discrepancies in her bank activity. Her hand shook as she clicked the attachment. There it was, fabricated screenshots showing transfers she'd never made. Her name stamped under false signatures, transactions to accounts she'd never seen. It looked convincing, dangerously so. The pit in her stomach deepened as the puzzle locked into place. Grant believed she was hiding a payout, something that never existed. A claim, supposedly from her late father's insurance. The idea was absurd, but the paper trail was real enough to destroy her. She imagined how it would unfold. He'd accuse her of fraud, show the falsified evidence, let the system tear her apart. Then he'd disappear, taking everything, their home, their savings. And whoever he was seeing on those late nights would walk right into her life like it had been planned from the start. The front door creaked open. Lena jolted, slamming the laptop shut just as Grant's footsteps echoed down the hallway. "You're up early," he said, appearing in the doorway with that practiced smile. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, forcing a yawn. He stepped closer, brushing her shoulder. "You worry too much. You should trust me more." His words landed like poison dressed as comfort. She smiled thinly, murmuring something about breakfast, and slipped past him into the kitchen. As she stirred her coffee, her reflection shimmered faintly in the dark window, calm on the surface, but underneath, something had shifted. Now she knew, and knowledge, she realized, was the one weapon Grant never meant for her to find. The discovery came by accident. Lena wasn't searching for proof. She already had too much of that. But curiosity led her to open the envelope left carelessly in the glove compartment of Grant's car. Inside were printed receipts from a small lakeside in 2 hours away, each one signed in his handwriting. The first few listed business dinners, but one included an extra breakfast for 2 and a single room. Her chest tightened. She flipped the page, and there it was, Mara Whitfield. Her own best friend's name in the guest log, written in the same neat loops she'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists. For a moment, she couldn't move. The sound of rain on the windshield blurred into static. Every memory came rushing back in fragments. The late-night calls Mara said were from her sister, the weekend getaways, when Grant swore he was at conferences, the knowing looks she'd brushed off as imagination. The puzzle had been there all along. She just hadn't wanted to see it assembled. That evening, she sat on the couch, the house dim and still. The scent of Mara's favorite candle, gifted to her months ago, lingered faintly in the air, suddenly sour. Grant's voice drifted from the other room, laughing into his phone. It wasn't the tone he used with her. Lena rose quietly, stepping closer until she caught his words through the half-closed door. You worry too much. She's clueless. His voice softened, coaxing. Next weekend, same place? The sound of her own breath seemed deafening. She backed away before he noticed, retreating to the kitchen where the lights felt too bright. Her hands shook as she reached for a glass of water, but stopped halfway, gripping the counter instead. The betrayal wasn't a sharp pain. It was a slow unraveling, a numbness spreading through her veins. When the front door closed behind him an hour later, she stayed where she was, staring at the clock. Each tick sounded deliberate, mocking. She could have screamed, confronted him, destroyed everything in one burst, but she didn't. The idea of rage felt wasteful. Instead, she sat down at the table and began to think. Not about heartbreak, but about precision. About timing. She replayed every detail she knew. The fake accounts, the fabricated documents, the secret meetings. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was a structure. One she could use. She started a list in her head. The receipts, the files, the voices on the phone. Evidence he didn't know she had. Each piece would serve a purpose. She wouldn't confront. She would dismantle. By the time midnight arrived, the storm outside had quieted, but her mind had not. She looked at her reflection in the window, calm, steady, unfamiliar. The woman staring back wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the one being watched now. She was the one watching. Lena chose a calm morning to begin. Grant was sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone, the picture of indifference. She leaned against the counter, voice casual. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe you were right. About keeping some savings separate, just in case. He looked up, surprised for a fraction of a second before the mask returned. That's smart, he said, smiling faintly. Security's important. She nodded, pretending to hesitate. I've got an appointment at the bank tomorrow. I'll open a private account. Nothing big, just a start. He reached across the table, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Good idea. You've been so responsible lately. The words nearly made her laugh. Inside, she felt cold, deliberate. That afternoon, she spread papers across the dining table, draft statements, transfer slips, everything designed to look authentic. She even left a note reminding herself of account setup at 10 the next morning. It was bait, and she placed it perfectly. Before she left the house, Lena made one more call. Mrs. Kilner answered on the second ring, her steady tone like an anchor. He's taking the bait, Lena said. Good, the woman replied. My son will be nearby. You don't need to worry about being alone. Thank you, Lena whispered, though gratitude felt too small for what she meant. The next day, she dressed simply, grabbed her purse, and drove off, but only halfway to the bank. She parked near a diner, close enough to see her house from a distance through the trees. Her pulse thudded with every passing minute. At 10:12, the black truck pulled into her driveway. Grant stepped out, glancing around before disappearing inside. The sight should have broken her. Instead, it steadied her. She dialed the number Mrs. Kilner had given her. Got him, a man's voice said. He's in there now. Through the windshield, Lena watched as the minutes ticked by. When the detective emerged from his car, she stayed silent, letting him work. The wait stretched until she saw movement by the door. Grant coming out, folder in hand, eyes darting nervously up and down the street. Then the detective stepped forward, calm, professional, voice low but firm. Grant froze mid-step. Lena couldn't hear the exchange, only the gestures. The man pointing toward the forged paperwork, Grant's feigned confusion collapsing into panic. Within minutes, the detective was on the phone, his tone clipped and assured. Grant stood by the car, shoulders tense, jaw locked. He tried to speak, to charm his way out, but it was over. The folder slipped from his hands, papers scattering across the pavement like broken wings. Lena exhaled, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. The trap had closed perfectly, every move unfolding exactly as she'd planned. When the detective waved her forward, she stepped out of the car. Grant turned, shock flaring across his face as he saw her. She met his stare, unblinking, the quiet satisfaction in her voice cutting deeper than any shout could have. "You really should have trusted me, Grant," she said softly. "I might have saved you from yourself." The living room felt smaller than it ever had, air thick with the weight of exposed truth. Grant stood near the doorway, hands trembling, eyes darting toward the folder spread across the table. Each page glared back at him, copies of the forged transfers, photographs, and the report signed by the investigator who had caught him hours earlier. Lena sat opposite him, her phone resting on the armrest, the red recording light blinking faintly. "Tell me again," she said evenly, "how this was supposed to end." Grant's jaw tightened. "You don't understand, Lena. I was trying to protect us." "Stop lying," she cut in. "You weren't protecting anyone. You were erasing me." He moved toward her, palms raised, voice cracking. "It wasn't like that." Mara said. Her gaze snapped to him. Mara said. The silence that followed was a confession of its own. She reached for the small remote beside her and pressed play. From the speaker, Mara's voice spilled out, panicked, recorded hours earlier when Lena had called her from an unknown number. "I told him it was a bad idea," Mara said on the recording, tone trembling. "He said it would look like she took the money. I just wanted to be done with it." Grant lunged toward the phone, but Lena was faster, stepping back with it in hand. "You were both done with me the moment you decided I was convenient." He froze, chest heaving, eyes wild. "You set me up." "No," she said quietly. "I just stopped pretending not to see." The wail of sirens grew faintly in the distance, steady and certain. Grant's expression shifted from rage to panic, his words tumbling over each other. "Lena, please. We can fix this. Just say it was a misunderstanding. I'll tell them." She shook her head. "You'll tell them exactly what you did." The knock on the door was firm. The detective stepped inside, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Grant turned pleading eyes toward Lena as they read him his rights, the sound of metal cuffs snapping shut echoing through the room. Then came Mara, drawn in by her own fear, arriving minutes later, makeup streaked, voice hoarse. "Lena, please, I didn't know he'd go that far." Lena regarded her calmly, the red light still blinking between them. "You did," she said softly. "You just thought I'd never see it." Mara tried to step closer, but one of the officers blocked her. The 2 of them, her husband and her friend, stood side by side, stripped of the confidence that had once bound them. For the first time in months, Lena's voice faltered, just once as she spoke. "You both followed me," she said, her words sharp but trembling. "You just didn't expect me to follow back." Grant's shoulders sagged. Mara covered her face. The officers led them out into the gray afternoon. When the door shut, Lena turned off the recorder and exhaled slowly. The house was silent again, but this time it wasn't hollow. It was hers. The cottage sat at the edge of a narrow road, tucked between rows of birch trees that shimmered silver in the afternoon light. It wasn't grand, but it was steady, quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't weigh on her chest anymore. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the porch boards, the wind brushing the windows, these sounds belonged to her now. Lena set down a steaming mug on the table, its surface cluttered with books and half-finished crossword puzzles. The world had slowed to a rhythm she could finally breathe in. No phone calls in the middle of the night, no footsteps outside the window, no pretending. Just the echo of her own thoughts, soft and clean. A knock came at the door, gentle, familiar. When she opened it, Mrs. Kilner stood there, wrapped in a long coat, holding a pie in both hands. Her eyes carried that same calm strength Lena remembered from the store aisles months ago. "I baked too much," the older woman said with a small smile. "Thought you might want a slice." Lena stepped aside, gesturing her in. The scent of apples and cinnamon filled the air as they sat at the kitchen table. The older woman studied her quietly for a moment before speaking. "You learn to see people clearly now." Lena met her gaze and nodded. "It took losing everything to realize what I still had." Mrs. Kilner's smile deepened, a quiet approval passing between them. "Clarity's a hard gift to earn, but once you have it, you don't give it back." They ate in companionable silence, the ticking clock marking an ordinary peace that once felt impossible. After a while, the woman rose, leaving behind the rest of the pie wrapped neatly in foil. At the door, she turned back. "You're all right now," she said softly. "Don't let anyone dim that." When the car disappeared down the road, Lena lingered on the porch, the cool air brushing her skin. She looked out across the trees, their branches swaying like a slow exhale. She thought of that moment in Costco, the whisper that had shifted everything. "The person behind you has been following you." Back then, the words had felt like a warning. Now they carried a different meaning. They weren't about danger. They were about waking up, about turning around and finally facing what was always there. Lena breathed in, long and steady. The weight that once pressed on her heart had turned to something lighter, something like freedom. She closed her eyes, listening to the quiet. It wasn't empty anymore. It was her beginning. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me till the end of this wild journey. Imagine discovering your husband and best friend plotting behind your back, only to turn their trap right back on. Painful? Absolutely. But it taught me freedom is louder than revenge. If this story hit you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you in the next one. Bye!